Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz, and with us today is Justin A. Williams. He has a master's degree from Rutgers and academic roots at Princeton and Rider University. He spent years thinking critically about education, political theory, and personal freedom, all through a classically liberal lens. I met him at the recent Soho Forum debate between Alex Naresta and Dave Smith. He's also the author of Reborn Virtues Constellation, a fantasy novel deeply influenced by libertarian views. Justin, welcome to the program.
Hey, how's it going, Michael? Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. But the first question I got to ask you is, who do you think won the debate and why?
So look, I thought that both combatants were very, very educated on the topic. I mean, I think that they both presented normally what I expect them to both say. I did like uh, Dave the most, and I'll say why. Because I think if the other person was Alex is his name, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Alex, I thought was a little bit utopian. I mean, when he started talking about like no nation should have any borders, and then Dave was kind of saying that volunteerism is about you willfully picking and choosing how you want government to respond to you, because government at the end of the day is supposed to respond and work for people. That's the only really reason why we have it, right? And John Locke's social contract theory, we don't necessitate these things. We do these things because they're advantageous. And if people are saying in a wide margin, up to, from what I've seen, the statistics are like 70% of the people want immigration changes, then that's the will of not only a majority, but that's the will of a voting electorate that's probably going to vote that way. And as we've seen in the last election, that's the way that they voted. Regardless of what you think about the unsundry things about Trump or controversies, they picked him, and that's what we have to live with. I think, I've been a Democrat in my life too. I've oscillated in different philosophies my whole life, and when I found libertarianism and stoicism, I found a place where I could say, you know what, if my side doesn't win, I can accept that. And I think not enough people are able to do that. And I think in the debate, it was clear that Dave was a person who could say, look, the most intellectual way of thinking about this is not the most practical way of thinking about it. Right? We can be high-minded about theory, but I think uh, we want to root this in people first. That's the first definition of why we want to have any philosophy, any way of living, any way of being governed, is that it is rooted in people, absolutely, not necessarily some ideal that may or may not apply.
Now, what was your position going in? Because we had a vote, state our position before and after. Now, cards on the table. I'm an open borders guy.
Mhm.
I knew there was nothing that was going to happen during the debate. I've studied the issue enough. I wasn't going to change my mind.
Right.
What was your position going in?
So my position was that um, immigration is an issue where we should have borders that protect the people from people that are coming in that don't mean us any good. Now, how do you decipher that, right? I believe in legal immigration, obviously, and I think legal immigration is a great boon for a country. But I also understand that if 70% of the people or don't want it, that it might not happen that way. My position going in was actually kind of close to Ronald Reagan's, which was an amnesty position, which was if you're in this country, and yes, you probably came illegally, but you are someone who is contributing to the economy in a positive way, you don't commit crimes, you're a good citizen, and you are practicing good civics, I thought there should be some kind of amnesty for you. That was the old school Republican theory. That was old school Republican notion, and that's kind of gone by the wayside now. That's been now I'd be called like
A rhino.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was my position going in, and to be quite honest, I was new to Dave. Our mutual friend Kyle put me on to him. But I am not new to necessarily the arguments that were at hand. So that was my position, and I think it didn't really change much. I think when I got at the end, I wanted to really agree with Dave Newman, about um, the merits of immigration, but I think he sticks to that. But I do disagree with him in that.
You mean Alex and the rest of it?
Alex, yes, yeah, Alex, yeah.
Who's Dave Newman? We got a new character introduced.
Yeah,
Who's
is that not his name? I'm sorry.
His name's Alex Naresta.
Alex Naresta. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Is there a Dave Newman?
There has to be somewhere.
There is. There must be a Dave Newman. Maybe I'll look him up and see if he wants to come on the show.
So Alex, I believe was someone that I agreed with in theory. So I really enjoyed the debate. I mean, I thought the crowd really got into it. I thought the crowd really loved it, and I thought that the most important thing is that they were civil towards each other. From what I heard about them before from Kyle, is that my friend is that they sometimes were a little cantankerous towards each other on the internet. So it was good to see two people who disagree at least agree to be civil.
It's funny because I disagree with Dave on a lot of things, and he and I have had some not nice interactions on social media. Yeah. So, I had previously had Gene Epstein on this show, and that's how I ended up at the debate. And then I saw Dave, and I told Gene, I said, hey, introduce me, and Gene starts telling Dave about me. Dave said, I know. I said, yeah, but I'm much nicer in person. And that's kind of the case, that sometimes things get out of hand on social media. And when you meet someone in person, it's different. So I actually had a chance to talk to him. I told him I thought he lost the debate, but I did think he did better than what I thought he would do. Mm-hmm. I think that he has a real advantage in debates because he's a performer. He is a stand-up comic. He knows how to relate to crowds. And whether I like it or not, that type of communication has influence, right? So I thought Alex won on the substance, but I thought Dave is much better at appealing to a crowd of people. So that was my take on it. But I want to get to you now.
And especially a crowd of people that it seemed like was balanced towards his favor anyway.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wonder about the voting on those things, because if I'm a jerk, I could go in and say, yeah, this lie about my position. And then at the end say I switched my position. So I'm not saying people did it. I don't know whether they did or not. People can do it. Right. But I thought it was a good discussion. I've interviewed Alex before. I like him. But it was a very good experience. I'll definitely be going back.
Yeah.
Now you got a master's from Rutgers, you said, right?
Yes, political science.
So when did you first become interested in poli-sci as a topic? Was it always the case, or did it evolve?
So when I was in high school, I had a teacher named Mr. Spatola, and he was known as being the toughest teacher in school. He taught an AP Gov class, and I said to myself, I think when I get older, I want to be a lawyer, and I think politics could kind of help me. That I was a careerist at that time, as we all are when our parents are dictating our thoughts and what we want to do. So I went to that class and I got my ass kicked. First month I was failing that class. It was so demanding, not in terms of the work and the reading, but the thought process. I'd never had to think really critically very much in high school. Things were kind of carbon copy, and you do the work, you get the grade for the most part. But he challenged us to really think deeply about a lot of issues. And one of the issues that came up one day was, it said different political theories. And it said libertarianism, it said conservatism, liberalism. And he had asked us in a fishbowl seminar, basically, where do you think you fit? Because I'll never tell you where I fit as a teacher. He said that. So from there, I went on this journey kind of to think about things deeply and critically best I could. And I became a religion major at Princeton because I, again, was trying to find not only the external kind of journey, but the internal journey. And politics was kind of answering that question for me. I would leave class, I'd go put on either Fox News, MSNBC, CNN. I really buyed into the narrative that these were like honest and, opaque things to listen to that would give me information unbiased. At the time. So that was my news outlet. And I remember having a debate with somebody when I got older, and they said, you debate pretty well. You got a lot of skills. Where do you get that from? And I said, it comes from my high school class. Like, I was in graduate school in 2000. I finished in 2018. And my class in high school was the most influential thing to ever happen to me. And it taught me about the power of an individual to change somebody's life completely.
So at some point, you get introduced to classical liberal libertarian ideas. Who was the first thinker that you were exposed to?
Well, I'd say besides someone like Ayn Rand and besides someone like a lot of classical liberals, like let's say Bill Maher was a big influence on me when I was growing up. I think he's a decent classic liberal, one of the more popular ones in the comedy realm. But honestly, it was my father. My father was a big influence on me in terms of my political thought. He was somebody who was a big hippie in the 60s, in the 70s, and he changed his mind about kind of finance. He went into finance after college, and he would always teach me about, like, he came from nothing. He came from Hollis, Queens. He used to teach right outside where Run DMC in the beginning when they were in high school was setting up their boom boxes and about to deliver freestyles and things like that to try to get a record deal. He just was a very, very powerful individual who had seen the flaws in certain movements of his time and tried to teach me to stay away from whatever those were, right? Like, he saw that the most impactful civil rights leader he thought was Sam Cooke, the R&B singer, because he owned his masters, he owned his music, and he was teaching other Black artists how to do the same thing and lease out your music to other artists to make good money, and then from there make impact in your community. So that was my foray into liberalism at classical liberalism at first. Other thinkers I also liked were I don't agree with William Buckley on many things, but I like the fact that he had a debate show and he was really argumentative and educated on a lot of topics and would have people of different sex come onto his show. I really appreciated that, even though he was different at my politics for most of my life. Thomas Hobbes is a big influence on me, and John Locke. That debate. I'm really interested in classical thinkers and that clash, right? Yeah. So you have Rousseau and Montesquieu. You could have something where you have Epicureanism versus Stoicism. Those things influence me in terms of getting my thought process and where I create the stories that I create and that.
William F. Buckley is from the same state as I am, Connecticut.
Really?
Yeah. After 9/11 happened, I was incarcerated at the time. I wrote him and I said, listen, I would like to be able to contribute in some way. I feel bad. I can't do anything. I'm in prison to the war effort. And I also wrote him some of my thoughts on current politics. I think I was 25 at the time.
Wow.
And he wrote back. I asked him, would you be willing to mentor me? And he wrote back and he said, and I'll never forget the way he began this letter. Like, if you're going to be disagreed with, this is how it's to be done. Mm-hmm. He said, it is with profound reluctance that I find the flaw in your most appealing line of reasoning. Right? And I'm like, wow. So we actually exchanged letters, and he was a really nice guy. I mean, I didn't know much about him beyond the fact that he started National Review, and I know there's a lot of controversial stuff in his past and whatnot. But in my engagement with him, he was a nice guy. Not many people are just going to write back to somebody in prison and be willing to answer questions. So I liked him. It sounds like you enjoy the tension between thinkers, and just, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it's almost like a dialectical thing where you take two thinkers and you kind of toggle back and forth and try to figure out where you stand on the issue. Would that be accurate? Am I reading it correctly?
I would say so. I think that's an accurate depiction of myself. I kind of grew up not really watching, obviously you can watch Roman debates live, but reading about the debates between Caesar and Cato and Cicero, and then obviously the rest of the Roman Senate that was not on his side. And why I love that is because, I mean, I guess every millennial male thinks about Roman Empire all the time, but what I loved about reading about those stories was at first I agreed with Caesar, right? I was a hardcore when I was growing up. I was very religious. I was a Protestant, practicing Protestant, and I thought one way about pretty much everything when I was outside of school, and I didn't have to think academically. And then I started to change over time and not agree with Caesar, right? I was this empirist kind of person where you need a strong central government and you need all that to kind of corral the human mind because, like James Madison said, right, men are not angels, right? So we need that. But I changed over time deeply, especially during COVID. COVID allowed me to go beyond just the tension between philosophers and really think about like, wow, like people are not necessarily being honest with us. And not only that, institutions have the power to not be honest with you, and they don't really have the incentive to be honest when there's a potential crisis. So, what do we do? How do we leverage against that? In my opinion, it's being knowledgeable, it's being educated, and it's making the right point at the right time to enough people. I've been a teacher in my life. I've been a professor too. I've been a high school teacher as well in past couple of years. And what I would say is that when I was teaching, I tried to the best I could get people to think critically on their issues, but also not necessarily pick a side. Think of your own side first, and then come to think of who you align with in the past and how they inspire you. They say never meet your heroes. Well, you know, one of my great heroes as a writer, I think his name was Franklin Turner. He was a writer in the early century, 19th century, and he wrote about Americanism and the rugged individual. And I remember I had a girlfriend at the time who was more like a black nationalist separatist girlfriend. And
Wait, hold on. I wanted to talk about that for a second. Hold on. Like in the
Yeah.
Marcus Garvey vein?
Yeah, in that way, but maybe more recent individuals, more like Cornel West kind of
Okay.
thinking. And I was in this class. I don't know if you know his name, Eddie Glaude. He's on MSNBC quite a bit. He was my professor.
I don't. The name sounds like I probably heard it, but I might just be inventing that. So I don't know.
Yeah. Like I was inventing, right? He was on Morning Joe quite a bit. And he was the teacher of a class called American Jeremiad, which is about whether or not America is a project of hope or, as a 1619 project, I think erroneously says, is just about racism and slavery. And what I loved about Franklin Turner was he talked about the individual going through the wilderness and not understanding where he is or what he's doing, but accepting that there is hope at the end of the tunnel, right? And I think that's how we should see America. And I talked to my girlfriend about this at the time, and she was like, "You're changing quite a bit. You're gonna end up dating someone that's not me." And I was like, I don't know. I mean, that's not what I'm trying to do, but in the situation dating you, I do see the flaw in the nationalist, the kind of separatist thinking that you're thinking, right? Like people like Farrakhan and other thinkers, they can be very eloquent, but there's not a lot of sense in thinking that we're gonna, as Black people, create our own nation within America and then be able to survive economically. If I could go on a tangent here for a second, and this influences a lot of my writing. I have a universalist perspective. I think it's like Martin Luther King. I think we should be voted, we should be judged on our character. And I think that clashes with a lot of people in the African American community, the intellectuals at least, that you see at MSNBC, because they say to themselves, well, we're angry, we want reprisal, and some of them believe that segregation was the height of us, that we had our own restaurants, our own this and that, but they don't realize that like that was in like a couple of places. You have Harlem, you have maybe LA, you have Colorado, some places, and then you have much in the South. And they don't really think about the fact that that's not going to survive throughout the century economically. And so that's why, for me, the most important thing I always teach when I taught my economic empowerment class back in out here in Long Island was that you really need to think about what is your responsibility. Things that happen to you are not your fault. Where you start in life is not your fault, but it's your responsibility to get yourself to where you want to go to. And obviously, you want to make alliances and coax them into your vision. But yeah, personal responsibility is a really big thing to me, and that I think changed me.
Wow, you said so much that I want to respond to it. I want to start at the end, and then I want to go back in my thinking.
Sure.
Good friend of mine in prison, and it's funny. I just talked about this the other day in an interview I did. Is I gravitated, and the people that I associated with gravitated toward the people in prison that were trying to learn, right? And that's rare. So you can't, if you want to learn stuff, like if you're going to say I'm going to segregate myself by race, you're going to have like 2 friends,
Right.
if that, right? So we had, people, black, white, Hispanic, not really much else, but that's the groupings, and we would debate a lot of topics. And he started off more as a militant Muslim, and he ended up loving Thomas Sowell. And when we would talk, what I would say to him is, look, to me, it's 2 things are really not arguable. The first thing is, as a black man in America, if you and I, all things remaining equal, I'm white, you're black, equal education, everything, we both go out to get jobs, it's probably going to be easier for me. I think that's true. I also think it's true that you can make it and be very successful in America, right? And those things can both be true, but a lot of times you hear arguments like, no, there's no racism, you can make it, it's easy, go do it, or no, you're oppressed, you can't do it. And those are 2 views that I just don't think are correct. And I think it comes down to the approach that you're taking. I view America also as a place of hope. Obviously, we haven't lived up to the aspirations set forward in the Declaration of Independence, but it does serve as an ideal to reach for. And I think that if you get caught up and you say, no, America has lived up to the ideal, all the claims of racism, all the claims of oppression, that's all bullshit, you're going to be wrong, right? But you're also going to be wrong if you say America's built on slavery, America's built on racism. That's also not true. And you have to, I think, take the whole, look at it all and say, okay, America is a place that's flawed. What place on the planet hasn't been, right? But it's also the place where we largely rise above that stuff and get it right. And I was talking to another friend of mine who was a Christian, not a psychologist, a Christian counselor on the street. And he ended up in prison, and he had a PhD. And I really liked him. We used to talk to him a lot. That he would be a far left liberal, not a militant of the Farrakhan type, but more like a Dyson. Michael, what's his name? Michael
Eric Dyson.
Michael Eric Dyson. He really liked him. And we were watching the news together one night, and there was 100-year-old, I think, black woman, and she was in the White House, with Obama. And he looked at me and he said, you know what? We get it right. Because I said to him, imagine this woman's mind going from, born, it must have been, 1910, and growing up in that world. And now she's in a world where you have a black president and she's in the White House. And he said to me, my very liberal friend, we get it right. And I think by and large we do. Right. I mean, am I mistaken? Am I just looking at this from some white guy lens, or is this a healthy, accurate way to look at it?
I believe it's a healthy way, accurate way, and I think it's also supported by the data. And Thomas Sowell shows us that. I used to be very, very begrudging of Thomas Sowell because he would say things like, back in 1913, there were more female PhDs than there are now. And I would be like, well, there's got to be something skewed about that data. I mean, come on, 1913. But, he's an accurate guy. And I think he values being accurate more than being famous or necessarily like championed for his opinions, because he's not. And for me, I think this country is a place that is a Jeremiah, right? And Jeremiah in the Torah or Old Testament is a prophet who talks about a future coming of a great society, basically, to paraphrase it. And along the way, if you study the Old Testament, you know that the ancient Hebrews go through a lot of trials and a lot of tribulations from their God, but also from persecuted societies. And they fall into what is called apostasy, right? They fall into bad behaviors. America has done that too. We have fallen into bad behaviors when we did Japanese internment, when we had slavery, and many things we can name and number. But there are still these moments where out of nowhere someone comes and acts appropriately. Benjamin Harrison. People don't know this about him. I had the Benjamin Harrison Society on my podcast, The Trend, and he went and he started with his wife the first civil rights kind of action and organizations in the country. Benjamin Harrison, we don't know much about him as a president, but he did that. And those moments that you would love to hear that can kind of defy that kind of radicalist notion that America is just steeped in racism infrastructurally and not, will be defied by moments where you see people that you would never think of doing amazingly wonderful things. It's quite honestly, I think, a construct created for us, but not by us. If you went down, there's a great moment I just saw on TV where they asked a bunch of, I guess, white liberal kids at NYU in Columbia, is having a license, right? A license, not a license, ID to vote. Is that racist inherently? And all the white kids were saying, yeah, of course that's racist inherently. And they never mentioned black people, but the white kids did. The white kids kept saying, black people can't afford this, and black people don't have this, and black people are poor in this way and victims in this way. Then they went down the street and into rest of Harlem, and they asked black individuals, what do you think? And they said, I have my ID right here. I have this. It's no problem for me to get an ID. It's not inherently racist. I mean, so I think there is something that is fed a narrative out there that is not necessarily the narrative of the people. And I think, obviously, this is a country that says we the people. That's a problematic going forward.
And we always have the means by which to criticize these things, right? That's how you criticize slavery. You go and you look and you say, look, this is the founding of the country. This is what we're about.
Of course.
We always have the means for the correction. But I got to tell you, those liberal types drive me batty, yeah. Right? I don't like having an ID. That's not a big thing to me. Voting, I get it is for some people. It's not for me. I don't see the issue with having to provide ID before you vote. But the liberal people that do that, like the friend I just mentioned to you in prison, he and I just mentioned this to someone else, the things that we would say to each other in private, if like we were recorded, we'd both be canceled. Probably forever, because we joke and we understand it's a sense of humor. We're not malicious. He talked, hey, Whitey, this, whatever. I'm not going to get into the whole thing because then I'm going to get canceled. But that's what we do. And I had a good friend of mine growing up, Puerto Rican kid, and I was talking to him on the phone, and he was calling me a white boy or something, and I responded in kind. And the girl that was there, who's one of these white liberals that you're talking about, she gets on me. Oh, I don't like you talking to him like that. And it's like, listen, lady, this is my close friend. We're joking. Guys do this with each other, right? We break each other's balls. I don't mean it. If I meant it, he wouldn't be my friend.
Of course.
But she just was stuck in this lens like, no, that's wrong. That's racist. You can't do that. And I'm just thinking to myself, do you really think I'm a racist? Like, I'm joking with the guy. He's joking back. But a lot of people, that's the lens through which they see the world. And to me, in many ways, that's the racist point of view.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, you need my help. You poor thing. You can't make it. And it's just, first of all, it's refuted by the evidence, right? By the overwhelming amount of evidence. And secondly, it's just so condescending, right? Like, it's like, come on, stop. Just stop.
And they wouldn't do that mostly to our faces either, right? They wouldn't come into a black person's home and start talking about some victimization narrative to our face. They'll do it amongst each other. and maybe they'll do it with like one or two black friends that agree, but they won't come into, they're not going to come into my mom's house and then do that, right?
Yeah.
There is a sense that they know what they're saying is condescending. There's a sense that they know what they're saying is maybe inaccurate, but it feels better, right? It feels good to say these things. It feels good to live in that reality. I would associate to like Platonism, right? The theory of the cave. They are existing in a cave, and in this cave, they have certain truths that are dancing on the wall in front of them that are not truths. They're just shadows, and they don't know how to get out. And some people, and people like that, no one's screaming to help them get out because they're kind of obnoxious, right? They're in their little social bubble of obnoxious people, and no one is saying like, yeah, you know what, I need to help Tommy out because Tommy's being an obnoxious liberal prick right now.
Yeah.
But but again, as people in a society that is pluralistic, we respect and expect that there's going to be people of different opinions than us. They have every right to express them. And I think by the very nature of the fact that they can go and they can protest and they can express themselves the way they want to, how they want to, is self-evident of how the hope exists in this country.
Yeah, it actually is. It refutes what they're claiming, right? It's
Yeah.
evidence against their position. So, in listening to you talk earlier, and this is really interesting to me because I just interviewed. I don't know if you know who Torre is.
Yeah. Was he on MSNBC?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I interviewed him the other day. And I didn't want the conversation. It wasn't intended to go down this route, but it did. And I'm happy. I enjoy talking about things that maybe people don't want to talk about, whatever.
Yeah.
But in listening to you talk about personal empowerment, about the Sam Cooke that you mentioned, there's definitely tints in there of Booker T. Washington.
Mm.
Of his message, and I wonder, first of all, have you read Booker T. Washington's book Up from Slavery, and has he had an influence on you? Because it sounds like he did, whether directly or indirectly.
Yeah, I would say he has. His old house is right out here by where I live, in Huntington, actually.
Oh wow!
I went by and I visited it, and it was a pretty interesting experience. Very, very nice house in the middle of the town. They've kept it very well. Again, evidence that the town is mostly white, and they're maintaining the old house of one of the maybe forgotten black figures of the post-slavery era. I'll be honest with you. When I first encountered Booker T. Washington's arguments, I was in middle school, and they were talking about him and W.E.B. Du Bois, and that's a classical debate. So I obviously leashed onto it. I did not agree with Booker T at first because of how it was described to me. It was described as limiting, as unintellectual, and as ineffectual. Right? That was how the teacher expressed it to me. She was obviously a fan of Du Bois, who said, "Go to college and get your liberal arts degree and be an intellectual and come up with your own ideas and think critically and go forth." And those ideas are fantastic until the fact when I got to college and I needed a job afterwards and I didn't have skills. I legitimately, I mean, even where I went to school, find places but I knew a lot of information, a lot of theory, but I didn't have the skills really, I think, to be successful right out of the gate, just personally for me. Then I started thinking about Booker T when Thomas Sowell started talking about him. And when I started thinking about Booker T and his notion that we are not going to be successful coming out of slavery without practical means of things that we can touch that are tangible in order for us to sell ourselves to a mass of people that we still need to convince. They called him an Uncle Tom for this, but that was an evil thing to do. I mean, he was saying things that I think still apply now. And if you look at a lot of African Americans that are either on the right or started to vote on the right in this election, a lot of them are saying a lot of things that Booker T was saying as opposed to W. Du Bois. They're saying, look, like white society was there and it was an impediment to us in our success, but there were still examples of us being successful. So how did that happen? Right? As early as 1920, as early as 1913, right? I think in the 1920s, you had the first black millionaire. So I think for the most part, Booker T is teaching still today to people who are willing to listen that stick-to-itiveness Dealing with realities as they are, right? You have a mass of people that you need to convince to like you, then they like you, and then they let you into their foreground, and then you convince them of whatever you want, and you talk to them on your own merit about why you're a human, why you should be dignified, why you deserve rights. Nothing comes without negotiation. I took a class on negotiation in grad school, and it was very, very powerful for me to learn about how life is negotiation. So is politics, so is society. When Martin Luther King was negotiating with LBJ, that was a moment of Booker T-ness for me, not necessarily Du Bois, because I think Du Bois, in a sense, would have been like more principled about it and would have tried to load the civil rights bills with a lot of different theory that maybe wouldn't have been practical at the time. I know Martin Luther King enjoyed listening to Booker T. Washington because I also know that he studied existentialism and the theory that you have a world out there that is not necessarily out there to conquer. It is a world to be a part of, and a world to conjoin others in that experiment. And you have to listen to Booker T. I wish in my career, if I can do anything to loud that in him and bring him back to prominence, I definitely would, because I can see the shift happening in a lot of minds of people that are my age and my color, or at least my race.
There's a part in Up From Slavery. I don't remember. I sense it was a church, but I'm not positive. But somewhere that he worked, Booker T, and he said that he just was cleaning the place, and he did his utmost to. And he said that's how you get ahead. You make yourself basically indispensable, because if people see you're going to do the best job for them, all the other stuff goes away. Right. Maybe not in everybody every time, but by and large. And I always think about that in terms of work ethic and how to get ahead in life. And I think it was great. I've often thought, and this is probably going to be a bit controversial, I don't know if it will be to you, but that a large problem within the Black communities in America stem from the fact that W.E.B. Du Bois was embraced and Booker T was pushed away. It doesn't mean I agree with everything Booker T said in terms of, the irrelevance of voting or, that sort of thing. But his message of independence, of hard work, of doing what you can to get ahead, of personal mastery, I just think is a very empowering message that transcends the idea that I'm a victim, I'm oppressed, and we need to use the political levers to sort of reverse that. Does that resonate with you, or am I just bonkers on this?
Yeah, I think we've been given a disservice by the intelligentsia within our community that is professionalized activism, right? There's a problem that erupts, they're there immediately. Who's calling them? How are they getting there?
Al Sharpton showing up.
Right. Like, how is this happening that it's the same cabal of 5 people? And then, of course, the minions come out on MSNBC and CNN and maybe even Fox News that are talking about, how oppressed we are. Again, the same narrative that you have either a specious event where it's uncertain what's really going on until the evidence fully comes out. And the evidence vindicates, obviously, the people that should be vindicated. Or you have a situation where it's clear there is racism there, but it's anecdotal, right? It defies statistics. There was a Harvard professor recently that did a study about police in the country. And he was on the more separatist side. He wanted to find information to indict the cops as much as he could. He admits to this. And what he found was changed his perspective completely. That there is, on the low level, you'll find a racist here or there. But institutionally, structurally, the racism did not exist across the board in the country. So what does that mean, right? How do we interpret that? It's the same way with Booker T. Washington, W.E. Du Bois. Du Bois is prevalent because he was embraced. But who chose to embrace him? A lot of people times it wasn't even African Americans. It's the white kind of grantors of opening the gates in the Harlem Renaissance. W.E. Du Bois comes to Harlem and he comes to the Northeast and he's educated at Harvard. He has all the right look. He looks more like me than he does like Booker. I think that's another thing too that mattered, right? That he had the right look that a lot of white intelligentsia wanted to look like, and he became the face of Black intellectualism in that era. And he inspires all the artists like Aaron Douglas and Langston Hughes in that era. Beautiful art, amazing art. But no one talks about some of the people that were really, really critical of all systems, like Booker T. Washington was, or really looking at it as a stick-to-itiveness that is the better value. What is the better value, right? Is it the stoic kind of do-it-yourself model where you'll push through and you'll get through eventually, or at some point, maybe even soon? Who knows? You might be surprised. Or is it the model where you sit and you ruminate and you debate over and over and over again until you now need to insinuate yourself into every situation that is controversial, because that's the only way for you to make money, right? It's the only way for you to be famous now. So it's obviously it's that's not the only way to look at the debate. But I do find that in this country, it's just not practical anymore for us to rehash the same civil rights arguments over and over and over again. I think we need new leadership or no leadership, right? Like in the Asian community, can you name their civil rights leader?
No.
In the Hispanic community, can you name their civil rights leader?
No.
Right. These are communities, Filipino, Indonesian, Nigerian. Um, it's not all about black and white, right? These are mostly newly immigrated communities that have come to the country, and they are doing very well economically.
Yeah.
If there was a huge racial barrier, why are they doing so well? They are doing well because of their values, because of their cultures, and because of they are following a Booker T model of success rather than a Du Bois model of success. When their kids go to college, and they become doctors and lawyers and PhDs, and they're doing practical things that are going to make them financially successful, but also esteemed in their community. They have the option to donate where they want and help their community in any way they possibly can. A large amount of us, when we go into college, what are we studying? We're studying ourselves. We're studying the failures of this country to us. We're studying things that are teaching us that to be depressed, I think, and to be dour about and down about America, African American studies departments and whatnot. We're not studying economics or mathematics or orgo. And even though I was a religion major, I would put that up there because religion major is a great major to get you into law school or political science graduate degree. So we need to get to a sense where we can look at both sides and look at what's going to be beneficial for us, not necessarily this thing where we keep saying leaders, 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 this and that and that. It's like, what about us as individuals? What about us and what we can do on a daily basis to get us to where we want to go to? Think, if you don't have a business, think like you have a business. You are a business. You are a brand. Get yourself to where you need to go by any, like Malcolm X said, by any means necessary. Right?
I thought that's what you were going to say.
Right, right. I think there's a lot of economic opportunity in this country for those who are willing to change the paradigm, right? Gen Z and Gen Alpha, from what I'm looking at, they're like college 4 years just to learn things that maybe don't apply to where I'm going to work. Maybe there's other options. When I was teaching my financial empowerment class, I promoted trade schools as much as I possibly could. Not because you couldn't go to a 4-year institution, but why do you have to go to a 4-year institution before going to a trade school? You can go to a trade school, get a real skill, and become a consultant in that skill. And you can travel the world, the country, with that LLC and that business. And then if you want to go to whatever college you want to go to, you can go to it. And why do you have to go to college straight out of the gate at 18? Why can't you make a business for yourself best you can and then go to college at 22? Yeah, it's going to be a little awkward, but I mean, it's going to be the best thing for you if you want both. So I think being creative is the thing that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are looking at. And I think millennials are looking back at that and saying, maybe I wish I could do it all over again. But some millennials are saying it's not too late.
My friend Carlos did 24 years in prison, went in when he was 15 years old.
Mm.
He got out. He now has a thriving hair braiding business.
Wow.
In prison, he learned how to braid hair. It's how he got a little extra money in there.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very good at it. I mean, he's in competitions and everything, but got out and now he's thriving. And if you're talking about somebody that spent decades behind bars, that's a huge strike against you, right?
Yeah.
Went in when he was 15, so he had no skills and no experience with responsibility.
Right.
He's Puerto Rican, so I mean, he's a minority, and yet he's thriving because he believed he could do it and he just did it. He didn't look for all the obstacles. Now, there's some obstacles in terms of government that stand in your way, licensing and that sort of thing, and the rules of the halfway house where he was staying. Oh, you can't go and you can't do this and you can't do that. But that's government impediments. That's not a result of the bigotry. So I kind of want to bring it back a lot. I want to bring it back to your classical liberal roots. How old are you?
I'm 38.
Okay, so you're 38 years old now. Obviously very educated. What do you think are the classical liberal solutions to some of the issues that we face politically and culturally today? Whether it be the big divide between the MAGA right or the alt right and the woke liberals, that's out there, or the economic problems of not enough housing available, or in what's called income stagnation. How do you apply your classical liberal sort of stoic libertarian philosophy to what's happening today?
Yeah, well, I think we need to first incentivize people to have self-esteem in themselves, to believe that if America is not good, if the world is not good, that quite frankly, that does not matter. What matters is there's opportunity. And if there's opportunity, then you have a chance to make change. So it starts at the education level, right? We have to reevaluate how we educate people. We have to look at models that are existing in other countries. In other countries, they don't value the test. They value the fact that you retain the knowledge. This is knowledge retention is one of the most powerful tools you will have in life because it gives you the mental fluidity to not only debate and discuss with people, but be strong in your opinion and to be willing to be told that you're wrong and to be told that you're right for both in both ways that can be good and bad, right? You'll be lauded by people and you won't get too high about it, and you'll be criticized by people and you won't get too low. And I think in the education system, what we also need to do is we need to bring back civics. We need to bring back teaching people what it's like to be in a pluralistic society and how to behave in the proper way. We have lost that. Schools don't teach it, right? We don't teach woodwork. We don't teach home ec. We don't teach all those options. But for the most part, civics has got to come back. And I think that is definitely on our politicians. Our politicians need to stop thinking about their 401ks and stop thinking about their stock market options, which I think as a classical liberal, I totally don't agree that, look, I believe in the Edmund Burke kind of model, right? Edmund Burke was a philosopher, I'm sure you've heard of him before, who, what he says is, I come from where I come from, my little duchy here in England, but now that I'm in parliament, I'm no longer of that duchy only. I am of a citizen and a powerful figure in an apparatus that is bigger than me now. I believe in that. And I believe in sacrifice when you become a politician. You should not be someone who has a salary of $800,000, but you know the stock market so well that you can make $800 million in your career. I think that biases you. I think that corrupts you. I think it makes it so that you don't want civics taught. You're going to go with the agenda that says ignorance over all things in life, right? And that's one of the things that I don't like about the victimization model either, right? I'm not saying that Stoicism does not teach that when you get hurt, you don't say, oh, that didn't hurt me. Yes, you could say in many ways, I choose to react to how that hurt me. I choose to react to how you hit me. But you are also honest with yourself and say, that broke my jaw a little bit. right? So no one is saying that people who are suffering through poverty or suffering through mental illness, right? We have to think about that in the country. Suffering through a whole gamut of things are not suffering those things. What I'm saying is that government, if it's going to be of use at all, it needs to be a better educational tool. It needs to be a better tool in the educational department or educational realm where we are teaching people that the values that are better for us to be successful as a collective, if we're going to, and as individuals, are going to be the values that are going to take us to where the aggregate and beyond can be successful. I don't believe that we've gone to the pinnacle of human society. And that's the problem that I see in people in my generation. We were taught when we were young that we are the pinnacle. Us millennials, 2000s coming, like it's going to be Prince all the time. We are the pinnacle of all that song. Like we are the pinnacle of everything. And the apex of history is now stopped. There was a book by a guy named Kawasaki, I think his name was.
Francis Fukuyama.
Fukuyama, yes, thank you.
The End of History.
Fukuyama, yeah, The End of History, which was different than Huntington's book, which was The Class of Civilizations, right? The Fukuyama talks about how, and my grad professor was in love with this book when I was in Rutgers. He would say that like history now has gotten to a point where we really don't regard it as something that we're making, it's something that we're reflecting on. And as a reflective model, we can say certain things. Now, I don't agree with that. I think that in 30 years from now or 40 years from now, there's going to be a reinvigoration in this country. There's going to be a reinvigoration because racially we are shifting. African Americans, Hispanics, Asians are not going to be the minority. You may see something that happens that unifies people that weren't unified before. And this could be for the best for everybody. But classical liberalism allows me the lens with which to say there are good things about some of our traditional values, and there are better values than other values. Not all values are equal. And just like you could say, not all speeches are equal, not all books are equal. And I think the values that are not working for us, just like a book that you can't get through, should put down for a while, revisit it eventually. But let's try to stay with things that we know are going to get us to a place where most people are going to be successful. And that's the end of this kind of counter racism I see in the country too. That's what victimization teaches, right? I mean, that's why I want to stay away from in my book. A lot of fantasy that I read now that is done is either color washed, where they're not talking about issues at all, like race, or it's color heavy, where it's centralized on such a thing. I always like the moderate middle ground position. One thing I will say about me that I didn't say before is that I spent a lot of time in a Buddhist temple in the city from the age of 10 to the age of 22. And I became a disciple. And what Buddhism teaches you is, like Stoicism, to handle obstacles by going through them, right? And the middle way. So middle way means conversation, more dialogue. I don't know why, if we're going to have PBS, why don't we have debates again on PBS, right? Why don't we use PBS and NPR and public radio and public media to better educate people just on the basics of civics? What is a rider? What is a bill? What is pork spending? What are these basic things? How do you make a bank account? When I was teaching Gen Z in high school and college, they were like, yo, we love your class because you just tell us practical things that have nothing to do with any of that Fugazi stuff that gives us headaches. We love that stuff because we debate it and we get angry at each other, but we need a break from that. We don't want to always think in the lens of my color matters more than anything, my religion matters more than anything, where I'm from matters more than anything, you know?
Yes. Justin, thank you so much for coming on today. You are absolutely fantastic. Where can people find you?
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Professor Jaws. You can also find me on Twitter at Dubs Everlasting. That's DUBZ Everlasting. I also have a YouTube channel that I'm starting up called Myth Mental Health, where I talk about the synergy of myth and mental health and making a better you. I'm also on Facebook on Justin A. Williams. And I have my podcast, which is The Trend with Justin A. Williams, which is found everywhere where podcasts are found. And I have my book, which is titled here, Reborn, Virtue's Constellation. And that's on anywhere books are sold online, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. We didn't even get to it, but that's all right.
Oh, I plan on having you back on. We'll have a chance to
Great,
get to
great,
it. Thanks
great,
a lot,
great.
Justin. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Michael.
For now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Liebowitz. Till next time.